that moment so clearly. The doctor said to me, your odds of getting breast cancer are significant. Today I'm going to open up and share my own personal story about my prophylactic bilateral mastectomy. That's a mouthful. That's just a fancy way of saying preventative double mastectomy. Because, so many women have asked me about this. It seems like everyone knows someone who's facing something like this, or they're facing it themselves. It's really personal stuff, but I think it's important that we open up about these things and share our stories with each other. So if you know someone who's facing this, I hope you'll share this video with them. I'm going to include a few personal photos, which are a little gruesome, to be honest. I took them not thinking I was ever going to show them to anyone, much less put them out there on YouTube. So if you're at all squeamish, you might not want to watch. But don't worry, I'm not showing any pictures of the girls because I don't want this video to get flagged by YouTube as anything it's not, if you know what I mean. Oh, and before I get started, just a polite reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you like it and subscribe to my channel. I make these videos to help others because I think it's really important that we all help each other out, even if it's just in some small way. So when people like and subscribe and leave comments, that sends a message to YouTube to share this video with more people like you, so together you and I can help more women improve their lives. Hi, I'm Rena Hedeman, certified career and life coach, and this is Thrive After 45, where I help midlife women level up in areas related to our mindset, our body, and our relationships. Oh, and please excuse my eye. I was playing with my dogs on the floor and I got a claw right across my eyelid. But anyway, moving on. So about 18 months ago, I found out that my odds of getting breast cancer were significant. I don't know why I was so surprised to hear that. Maybe I was kind of in denial. I shouldn't have been surprised though, because my mom said it twice and her mother, my grandmother, died of it. And about a few years ago, my younger sister, who was only 41 at the time, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I'm very happy to say she's doing great now. So I was on a video call with my medical oncologist, and after giving me that news, she said, okay, you've got two choices. Either you do nothing different, continue coming in for a mammogram and a breast MRI, alternating every 6 months, or you can go on an anti-estrogen drug such as tamoxifen, which reduces your odds of getting breast cancer by half. So, of course, I asked her a gazillion questions, as I'm sure you would have too, including, of course, all the possible side effects, not just of the tamoxifen, but also of having, so many breast MRIs and mammograms every year for the rest of my life. Because for a breast MRI, for example, they have to inject you with that blue dye, which is actually a metal with mild magnetic properties. It's considered safe, but I wanted to know all the data and possible harm from having it in my body so many times over so many years. See, I had several abnormal mammograms recently, and every time that happens, you have to have another one and then another breast MRI, and I just didn't want to have to keep going through all that because, it's stressful too. To be honest, I really didn't like either of the two options the doctor gave me, so I asked her if getting a preventative double mastectomy was even a possibility. I mean, I didn't really love that option either, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to know all my options. She hesitantly said, yes, a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy is a possibility, but she also said, you definitely don't have to do something so invasive as that. That's major surgery with a long recovery and can be very challenging, both physically and psychologically. So I asked her some more questions, and then I told her I needed time to think it over, of course. And then I did a ton of my own research. I mean, it's a really tough decision, and it's a really personal decision. I made appointments with different breast care doctors and surgeons, and I quizzed them like crazy. And ultimately, I decided that for me, the preventative double mastectomy was the least terrible of my three options. I know other women who've chosen different options for themselves, and that's great. As I said, it's a really, really personal decision, and everyone's situation is different. Okay, so after months of thinking about it and asking a gazillion questions, I decided to go ahead and have the surgery. I had many consultations with different doctors about all my options. There are so many variables. It's incredible, especially when it comes to breast reconstruction. First of all, if you're going to have breast implants, you've got to decide whether to have saline or silicone implants. The other thing you have to consider with implants is, do you want them to go under the muscle, which requires a second surgery a couple months later with painful expanders in between to stretch that muscle away from the rib cage? Or do you want over the muscle implants, which can be done right away, same day as the mastectomy in fact, and don't require expanders, but have a whole different set of pros and cons. And then there's the option of flap surgery, which is where they do the breast reconstruction using your own body fat from another part of your body. But that's really major surgery, like 12 hours as opposed to 5, with a much longer and more difficult recovery. I'm not going to go into all the details right now, but suffice it to say that there are tons of pros and cons to each different reconstruction option. Not all patients are candidates for all the options, and not all recon plastic surgeons perform all of them either. So it really depends on many different factors. And don't watch this and think, oh, I'd have this or I'd have that, because, the technology and the knowledge in medicine is constantly updating all the time. So even if you learned something last year, it's probably already totally different. I mean, obviously we should always first listen to our doctors and get all the facts and ask as many questions as possible, because each individual situation is different and each body is different. Yeah, so I chose under the muscle implants, and I've been happy with that, but I've spoken to many women who've chosen the other options too, and let me just tell you, none of these options is perfect or definitely not a walk in the park. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're very, very fortunate to have these options. But for example, it might sound like that flap surgery where they take your fat from somewhere else, like your stomach or your thighs, to make new boobs. It might sound like, wow, perfect scenario, right? But trust me, there are a lot of negatives to that procedure. A friend of mine in the town where I live chose that option, and she loved it and highly recommended it, even though the recovery, she said, was horrible and took an entire year and was really brutal. She's really happy with the choice she made now. But I also have a couple of other good friends who chose that option and have horror stories to tell. I chose under the muscle implants and have been very happy with the outcome. But I'll be honest, it's a little weird. I mean, my new girls they're a little weird. They look and feel fine. I'm happy and extremely grateful that my odds of getting breast cancer are now very low. I mean, obviously that's what this is all about. But I'll be honest, it's a little weird, because every time you lift something up or use your pecs in any way, something heavy, your muscles move, which means your boobs move. And if you're naked and happen to see yourself in the mirror in the bathroom, it looks a little strange. But you know what? I had this surgery to preserve my life, not to be a pin-up queen. And you get used to it. So personally, I'm totally fine with it. Friends of mine who've had over the muscle implants are happy for the same reason I am. Their odds of dying of breast cancer are a lot lower than before. But they too have slightly weird looking boobs, because since your skin is so thin and there's no muscle as a protective layer between the implant and the skin, sometimes you can see the rippling of the implant a little bit. Not always, but sometimes. Another difference between under and over the muscle is that when the implant is under, the muscle sort of, protects it and smushes them back a little bit. So it's a little bit more natural looking. When the implant's over the muscle, it makes the boobs protrude more from the body. So that part of it just depends on which look you prefer. I didn't want to look like one of the women from Dangerous Liaisons. So that was another reason I chose under the muscle. Oh, and one more thing that's sometimes a factor, but not always a choice. Some people can have a skin sparing and or a nipple sparing mastectomy. Fortunately for me, I was a candidate for that, which definitely simplified things and meant fewer follow-up procedures, which was really great. Oh, and don't worry about all those stories of breast implant sickness and recalls. Yes, those are true stories, but from what I understand from my recon plastic surgeon, the culprit was specifically the textured implants that were used. And those are, of course, banned now. And these were implants used in both reconstruction and, cosmetic enhancement. Okay, that's a polite way of saying boob job. They used to use textured implants because women wanted their new fake boobs to be teardrop shaped, so they looked more natural, not round like half watermelons just stuck on there. Know what I mean? But the problem is implants can move around, like a record on a turntable. Oh God, I'm really dating myself. I mean, who knew? Who knew they could move around in there? And so if you use teardrop shaped implants, they could turn upside down or sideways, so you could have a boob that was completely lopsided or even upside down. Yeah, I didn't know any of this until I asked my reconstructive plastic surgeon a ton of questions. So anyway, they made teardrop shaped implants with a textured surface so they couldn't move around like that. And for whatever reason, some of those textured ones made people really sick. And some even got a rare form of cancer called anaplastic large cell lymphoma. So they had to be recalled. Ugh. awful. But I'm not worried about that because I didn't have the textured implants because they don't use those anymore. But still, I'm well aware that the medical world isn't perfect. They don't have all the answers, and they try their best, but they don't pretend to have all the answers. And as with pretty much everything in life, driving a car, crossing the street, flying an airplane, there's always going to be some element of risk involved, right? I mean, that's life. So if you or someone you know is facing these kinds of questions, my advice is just give her love and tons of emotional support. These are tough decisions to make if she's even lucky enough to get options. Many facing advanced breast cancer don't have choices. My surgery was 5.5 hours long. First, the breast cancer surgeon did the mastectomy, but since I was a candidate for skin sparing and nipple sparing surgery, he actually didn't take them off. He just basically scraped out every single cell of breast tissue he possibly could. Then, while I was still under anesthesia, the recon plastic surgeon came in and placed the expanders under my pec muscles. The expanders look like round, flat plastic baggies, and when they put them in, they're empty. So when you go home, you're totally flat-chested. Here I am at about 3 weeks post-op. During the surgery, the doctors also put 2 drains in, 1 on each side. Some people have 2 on each side. That's because whenever any body tissue is taken out of your body then naturally fills up that area with fluid. But it's a lot of fluid, too much to be absorbed by the body. So they put tubes in so it can drain out, which takes about 2 weeks in my case, give or take. The tubes come out sort of just below your armpit, and then they drain into these little cups that stay attached to you by these little hooks that stick directly onto your skin. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Those drains are a drag. You have to empty the little containers and carefully measure the fluid twice a day or more and log the amounts every time so the doctors can monitor it on your next follow-up appointment. That part actually isn't that bad. But the part that's a serious drag, in my opinion, is the fact that while the drains are in, you have to sleep on your back every time. Not your side, obviously not on your stomach. Well, I'm okay with sleeping on my back sometimes, but I usually change positions many times during the night. I think most people do. So not being able to do that, having to stay still like a mummy wrapped up in a hot dog bun like this, that was a lot harder than it sounds. And when you get so little sleep every night for so many nights in a row, well, you know what happens. You're a wreck. I kind of lost it a little. I mean, sleep deprivation is torture. So when they pulled those drains out, I was ecstatic. After that, recovery is much easier, but those first couple of weeks are the toughest in terms of recovery. You're exhausted and weak, and it definitely helps to have support, both physically and emotionally. So, several weeks after the tubes come out and you're all healed up, you go back to the reconstructive plastic surgeon's office to get saline injected into the expanders. They put 50 cc's into each side using a needle that goes through this special little port thing with an airtight valve. It definitely feels a little weird, but it doesn't hurt. Then, as long as things are progressing smoothly, you keep going back each week to get more saline into the expanders. These round bags that get bigger, obviously, as they get filled with more and more saline each week. You stop getting the saline injections when you're at the cup size you used to be or that you want to be going forward. I know some women who chose to go smaller because they didn't like being really huge like before. I mean, that definitely wasn't my issue. I mean, I don't blame them. Think about it. 200 cc's on each side is about the equivalent of 1 cup size, depending on the size of the individual. So like, for example, if you wanted a B cup, you'd get approximately 400 cc's put into each of your expanders over at least 8 weeks. At least that was my experience. So that they expand slowly. So a D cup needs to be about 800 cc's on each side. Well, 800 cc's converts to 4 cups. 8 cups total considering both sides. Imagine having that much volume and weight on your chest. I was a small B. I wanted to go back to that too. So I got 375 cc's. Then once you're at what they call goal fill, you wait for, I think it's about a month or so. You have to give the full expanders the chance to sit there as placeholders, create these little pockets to make sure your muscles are stretched out enough and ready for the implants. Then when you eventually have your reconstructive surgery, which for me was about, I think 3.5 months after my mastectomy, they take the expanders out and replace them with implants that are roughly about the same size as the filled expanders were. That second operation is a breeze compared to the first one. Mine only took about an hour and a half. So the amount of anesthesia that you need is much lower too, and recovery is so much easier and shorter. And now, less than a year later, you can hardly even see my scars. It's incredible. And obviously I don't need to have any more mammograms. Yay! Is it perfect? No. I don't think anything in life is perfect. I mean, my odds of getting breast cancer are not 0. I think they're like 3%, but that's incredible compared to what they used to be. And I do have to get a breast MRI in 5 years. Everyone who has implants does, because they need to check in and make sure that they're still intact and haven't ruptured. And I think after that, I have to get one every 2 years. And I think the implants have to be replaced about every 10 years. Although I do have one friend who still has her same implants after 15 years because they're doing great. So if you or someone you love is in the situation I was in last year, trying to figure out what to do, I'm definitely not here to say that one option is better than the other. As I said before, it definitely depends on the person and her situation. And also, as I said before, it's crucial that you ask your doctors a ton of questions. None of what I've said in this video is medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a normal woman sharing my own story. If you want to ask me questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Please just ask them in the comments below and I'll get right back to you. And if you'd prefer to ask privately, that's totally fine. I completely understand. Just send me a direct message through Instagram. My handle there is thriveafter45. I'll put it down below in the description so you can see it. Or you can contact me through my website. I'll put that link below too. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so. I'd love to see you here again soon. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Oh, and remember, as I always like to say, take great care of your gorgeous self because you deserve it and you are definitely so worth it.